did you think I was going to do? Of course I was going to choose the giant robots.
Transformers Prime was released on the Wii, DS, 3DS, and the then newly released Wii U back in 2012. Being a nut for this stuff, I was hoping to get it near the launch of the Wii U, but I didn't get this game until recently, almost 3 years later. You play as members of Team Prime from the Transformers Prime cartoon. We start with the Decepticon ship, the Nemesis, towing what looks like an asteroid containing pure dark energon. The Autobots go in to stop Megatron's nefarious schemes, but the rock splits apart after they battle, and our heroes fall back to Earth.
I was a big fan of Transformers Prime back when it was airing on the Hub, now Discovery Family, as one of its biggest draws to the channel. I was kind of hoping the game would play like some sort of multi-part episode.
Transformers Prime is a combination of third-person shooter and platformer. Taking cues from the excellent Fall of Cybertron, you get to control different members of Team Prime, and each one has their part to play in the story. While the Wii U doesn't make use of an account-based achievement system, Activision clearly decided to put something in there as there are objectives you can complete outside of the main path. There are even multiplayer modes to mess around with after you're done trouncing the Decepticons. They all boil down to free-for-all events, and you can try to play up to against 3 extra bots to hone your skills. The biggest draw of this game is the fact that Hasbro really got on board with making it as close to the show as they could. The voice acting cast, including Transformers stalwarts Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, reprise their parts from the cartoon. The game also looks like it stays faithful to the cartoon animations and writing style.
So it looks like the cartoon, and it sounds like the cartoon. It also takes some cues from one of my favorite Transformers games of all time. But does it play well?
In a couple of words, not really. This game feels like a Wii game that got thrown onto the Wii U with a better skin. Kinda like Twilight Princess, only worse. The camera doesn't work too well unless you use the lock-on feature, but locking on also leaves you vulnerable to other things, making battles somewhat frustrating. Actually, most melees are frustrating anyway, unless you're able to fight things one-on-one. Otherwise, you can get into a knockdown loop where enemies hit you right after you get up. I also didn't like the controls that much. Yes, they're easy to use, but in frantic situations, I tended to forget certain special moves and button mashed until things started working again. This is probably more due to my play style than the game not agreeing with me, but a better tutorial in the game would have worked better. Oh, and those multiplayer modes I mentioned? No online at all. Granted, I can chalk that up to Activision, and probably Nintendo at the time, not knowing what the online capabilities of the Wii U were going to be. Combine that with the aforementioned Wii game and Wii U skin, and you get missing features. It also doesn't help that the multiplayer game types are fairly lackluster and feel tacked on. You can't have more than 2 live players playing on the same Wii U, and with the lack of online play, these modes will be forgotten quickly. The worst part of this is that the game feels really short and stuttered. There are 13 parts to Transformers Prime, all with varying lengths and objectives, but the last few bits feel like a big divided boss rush with some item finding. The longer levels are not seamless at all. While the areas break off in parts that make sense, they still break suddenly and make no attempt to disguise what is essentially loading time for the next part, even if it's just to load a cutscene. Again, it boils down to playing what seems like a Wii game that just got ported over to the Wii U to capitalize on a system launch. And it fails miserably.
In the end, I'm glad I got the game, but it wasn't at all what I wanted or expected. It just didn't wow me like Fall of Cybertron did all those moons ago. I'd like to say it was a decent game, but after all that, I can't even bring myself to say it. But now that the Giant Robot Fest is over, I can ask a question. Is Transformers Prime on the Wii U worth your cash?
Transformers Prime initially retailed at $50 at launch, and the Nintendo eShop still has it at that price. $10 more than the recent Rise of the Dark Spark that is available on multiple systems. I'm really glad I spent way less than $50. In fact, I managed to get the game brand spanking new for $11.30 off of Amazon, and I've recently seen the price drop even more. It's not a game I'd recommend at all, but if you're a Transformers game completionist, I'd try to get the game on the very cheap.
Well, it's definitely true. For every choice you make, there's a consequence, and with this, I definitely paid the price, even if it wasn't in money. I'd like to say it was a good game, but it wasn't. It was just mediocre. Transformers Prime is an example of a game that should have been cleaned up and expanded upon, but it just feels cheap. And as much as I love the cartoon that's associated with it, that's the only price point I can recommend. Cheap.